Hey guys, here we are in Sunday afternoon-ish, evening, going on to that. I'm recording now because I want to post the stuff tonight so you can see it, and because Dojo and Seesaw just get so overwhelmed in the morning. Um, Sometimes you guys have trouble logging in, maybe. I know I do. So I'm gonna record it tonight. And I'm actually gonna do 2 chapters now, just because I think we're now into it. We can now do a couple chapters at a time, especially when they're only like 3 pages. Is that alright with you? I think it's alright. Mostly because I have other books and I want to read them so badly, and I can't wait. So, let's get right to it. This is The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane. Scholastic allows me to read this. Yes, they do. Scholastic allows me to read Edward Tulane. Alright? So, as before, I want you guys to make a prediction about what's going to happen in this chapter. Again, what's going to happen in this chapter. Alright? So, remember at the end of the last one, lady picked him up, brought him home, made him a scarecrow. Because everybody uses China dolls for scarecrows. It's a very normal thing. So she's up there, hopefully scaring the birds away. So I want to know, what do you think is going to happen next? Bird going to get them? She's going to lose them? She's going to use them for something else? Go and make a prediction to yourself, to your parent, to your brother or sister. Do it now. I'll make my prediction to my dog. My dog is indifferent, guys. Just going to lay there. It's all right. And here we go, back to it. All right. Chapter 16, here is your... So remember what happens? A boy came in at the very end. Alright, so we're going to see who her boy is, not what her boy is. Bryce, said the old woman. Get away from that rabbit. I ain't paying you to stand and stare. Yes, ma'am, said Bryce. He wiped his nose with the back of his hand and continued to look up at Edward. The boy's eyes were brown with flecks of gold shining in them. Hey, he whispered to Edward. The crow settled on Edward's head, and the boy flapped his arm and shouted, Go on, get! And the bird spread his wings and flew away. Bryce, shouted the old woman. Ma'am, said Bryce. Get away from that rabbit. Do your work. I ain't say it again. Yes, ma'am, said Bryce, and he wiped his hand across his nose. I'll be back to get you, he said to Edward. The rabbit spent the day hanging by his ears, baking in the hot sun, watching the old woman and Bryce weed and hoe the garden. Whenever the woman wasn't looking, Bryce raised his hand and waved. The bird circled over Edward's head, as if for laughing at him. What was it like to have wings, Edward wondered. If he had wings when he was tossed overboard, he would not have sunk to the bottom of the sea. Instead, he would have flown in the opposite direction. And when Lolly took him to the dump, he would have flown out of the garbage and followed her and landed on her head and holding up on her sharp claws. And on the train, when the man kicked him, Edward would have not fallen to the ground. Instead, he would have risen up and top of the train and laughed at the man. Caw-caw-caw-caw. In the late afternoon, Bryce and Old Lady left the field. Bryce winked at Edward as he walked past. One of the crows lighted on Edward's shoulder and tapped him with his beak at Edward's china face, reminding the rabbit with each tap that he had wings. That not only could he not fly, he could not move at all on his own, in his own way. Dusk descended over the field and then became true dark. A whippoorwill sang out over and over, whip, 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 whip. It was the saddest sound Edward had ever heard. Bryce stepped out of the shadows. Hey, he said to Edward. He wiped his nose, the back of his hand, and played another bit of song on the harmonica. I bet you didn't think I'd come back here, but here I am. I came to save you. Too late, thought Edward, as Bryce climbed the pole and worked at the wires that were tied around his wrists. I am nothing but a hollow rabbit now. Too late, thought Edward, as Bryce pulled the nails out of his ears. I'm only a doll made of china. But when the last nail was out, he fell forward into Bryce's arms. The rabbit fell with a rush of relief, and the feeling of relief was followed by joy. Perhaps, he thought, it was not too late, after all, for me to be saved. Alright, here's the next chapter, and guess what? We're just going to keep on going. Alright? Is that okay with you guys? We're going to keep on going? Alright, so let's do that. Chapter 17. Bryce slung over his shoulder and started to walk. I'll come and get you for Sarah Ruth, Bryce said. You don't know Sarah Ruth. She's my sister. She's sick. She had her baby doll made out of china. She loved that baby doll, but he broke it. He broke it. He was drunk and stepped on the baby's head and smashed into 100 million pieces. Them pieces was too small, and I couldn't make them go back together. I couldn't. I tried. Definitely tried. At this point in the story, Bryce stopped walking, shook his head, and wiped his nose. Sarah Ruth ain't had nothing to play with. He won't buy her nothing. He says she don't need nothing. He says she don't need nothing because she ain't gonna live. But he don't know. Bryce started to walk again. He don't know, he said. Who's he? was not clear to Edward at all. What was clear is that he was speaking to a child to make up for the loss of a doll. And to be thought of a likely replacement for a doll really offended him. But still, it was, he had to admit, a highly preferable alternative to hanging by his ears from a post. The house in which Bryce, and Sarah Ruth lived was so small that crooked that Edward. Oops. Get it back to it here. Okay, well, I guess we'll just keep doing it like this. Lived so small and crooked that Edward did not believe at first that it was his house. He mistook it instead for a chicken coop. Inside there were 2 beds and a kerosene lamp, and not much else. Bryce laid Edward at the front of one of the beds, then lit the lamp. "Sarah," Bryce whispered. "Sarah Ruth, you gotta wake up now, honey. I brought you something." He took the harmonica out of his pocket and played the beginning of a simple melody. The little girl sat up in bed and immediately started to cough. Brian put his hand on her back. "That's all right," he told her. "That's okay." She was young, maybe 4 years old, and she had white blonde hair, and even in the poor light of the lamp, Edward could see her eyes were in the same flecked brown as Bryce's. "That's right," said Bryce. "You go on ahead and cough." Sarah Ruth obliged. She coughed and coughed and coughed, and the wail of the cabin in the kerosene light cast her trembling shadow, hunched over and small. The coughing was the saddest sound Edward had ever heard. Bryce said, "You want to see what I brought you?" Sarah nodded. "You got to close your eyes." The girl closed her eyes, and Bryce picked up Edward and held him like he was standing straight, like a soldier. "All right, now you can open them." Sarah Ruth opened her eyes, and Bryce moved Edward's china legs and china arms so it looked like as he was dancing. Sarah Ruth laughed and clapped her hands. "Rabbit," she said. "He's for you, honey," said Bryce. Sarah Ruth looked first at Edward, then at Bryce, and back at Edward. "He's yours." "Mine?" Sarah Ruth, Edward was soon to discover, rarely said more than one word at a time. Words, at least several of them strung together, made her cough. "Yours," said Bryce. "I got 'em especially for you." This knowledge provoked another fit of coughing in Sarah Ruth, and then she hunched over again. "That's right," said Bryce. He handed Edward to her. "Baby," said Sarah Ruth. She walked Edward back and forth and stared down at him and smiled. Never in his life had Edward been cradled like that. A baby. Abilene had not done it, not Nellie. There's cradling. I'm gonna give him a name, Bryce said. "His name is Jangles," Sarah Ruth said without taking her eyes off him. "Jangles, huh? That's a good name. I like that." Bryce patted Sarah Ruth on the head. She continued to stare down at Edward. "Hush," she said to Edward, and she rocked him back and forth. "From the minute I first seen him," said Bryce, "I knew he belonged to you." "Jangles," murmured Sarah. Outside the cabin, thunder cracked and came in the sound of rain falling. Sarah Ruth rocked Edward back and forth, and Bryce took his harmonica out and started to play, making his song keep rhythm with the rain. All right, guys, that was 2 chapters in. Thank you for staying with me on that. I guess we're already 8.5 minutes in. Sorry about that. So I'll try to wrap it up real quick with our questions. 1, how did Edward feel? Remember, this is all about feelings. How did he feel when he was given to the new child? Okay, so again, how did he feel when he was given to her? All right, so your answer is going to be, hey, Edward now felt blankety blank. And you can add the word because in there, because I love that word. He felt this because why is he changing his feelings? Okay, why does he keep changing like that? Okay, and then staying with feelings, because again, mostly about feelings, I want to know, how does the girl feel? Okay, if you have trouble with that one, you can tell me, how does the boy feel? He gave Edward to her, so you can say how he feels, but I want to know more how she feels. Okay, because little different feelings. She feels differently than the boy feels differently than Edward. So tell me about how they feel. Give me a complete sentence. I'll see you guys on Seesaw. Thank you guys so much. See you next time.